Hello, everyone, and welcome to Really Old Movies. I'm your host, Harrison Scullin, and today I'll be discussing Little Annie Rooney from 1925, starring Mary Pickford and directed by William Bodine. Alright, some behind the scenes details about Little Annie Rooney from 1925. An enormous detailed set was constructed at what was then called the Pickford Fairbanks Studio lot to recreate the Bowery in Lower Manhattan, New York City. Another detail: Helen Keller visited the set at one point and posed for publicity photos with Mary Pickford and the rest of the cast. Those are some interesting facts about this film. It was all filmed on a studio set, it wasn't on location or anything like that. So I thought that was pretty interesting and I'll kind of talk about later on how big of a set piece it really is just to look like, New York City. So I think that's pretty interesting. But let's get into my thoughts on the film itself. So the plot, I give it a 3 out of 5. I thought it was pretty good. I do think it is a bit weird that Mary Pickford is playing a kid here. She's like 32, 33, playing a 12-year-old. It's a little strange. And the strangest part was most of the cast she was around were actual kids, so she like towered over them. I don't know, it was just a weird optically looking, but also I don't know why she played a kid, kind of strange. But it is what it is, right? And then I thought that the rivalry gang stuff with Tim and Joe, I thought that was actually the more interesting story. I think that would have been a much, much better film just focusing on that. Tim's dad's a cop and his friends are in a gang. So I think that would have been a much more interesting dynamic than what we got here. We got a little bit of it. I wish that was the main focus, though. I don't think we really needed the little kid gang at all. I think it was just there for comedic laughs. And considering, those are the type of movies that Mary Pickford made that made a lot of money. And so it really feels kind of out of place compared with what the story is. But anyways, those are kind of my thoughts on the plot. So kind of talking about that with the acting, I give it a 4 out of 5. Again, I think it's weird that she towers over all the kids, but I do think Mary Pickford's pretty convincing as a young child. I don't know though. I kind of wish they were all just adults. This is just a story about two friends. One friend wants to be in the gang, but his dad's a cop, and then he has a love interest. I think it would have much more interesting if they were all adults, not some kids, some not. I don't know. It was kind of a weird dynamic considering how most of the actors were not kids, but some of them were. It was a weird blending, but I still like what they did with the acting. I do think it was convincing for the most part. All right, so let's talk about directing. I give that a 3 out of 5. Realistically, I don't know how much influence William Bodine had on the film. Considering, Mary Pickford wrote the story, she was the producer, she starred in the film. She probably had a little bit more influence than he did. But I just thought it was just okay. I really, really loved the conflict between the boys. I thought that was much more interesting and would have made for a better movie. And like I said, I don't know what the choice was there with some of them being kids. I really think they should all have been adults and this been like a gangster type of movie, that we would see a little bit later on with like James Cagney and whatnot. I think that would have been a better movie than what we got here. All right, so now let's talk about cinematography and special effects. I gave it a 4 out of 5. I actually really liked the giant set piece. I thought that was really cool. And I thought the fights were crazy. They were using, quote unquote bricks and just throwing them at each other. They must have been foam or something. It was crazy. They were just throwing them at each other. And I also love the color differences in the actual film itself. So if we were outside, bright and sunny, it was yellow. If we were inside, it was also that. But then if it was dark outside, it was blue and kind of dark looking. I kind of like that. I thought that was interesting. But if I'm going to be honest, it does feel like a stage. It doesn't feel realistic at all. It doesn't feel like we're in New York. Although the set is really cool, it doesn't feel realistic enough. And I'm comparing here to Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, and Harold Lloyd, who were also making movies at this time. And they shot on location. They had really extravagant set pieces that look more realistic. This movie just feels kind of flat compared to those. And so that's why I give it a 4 out of 5. I liked it, but it was not quite up to snuff with those guys. All right, so now let's move on to the music. The music, I gave it a 5 out of 5. The version I watched is the one that's on Canopy, and it is the restored version of the movie from the original negative with the Mary Pickford. I think it's the estate or something like that, maybe a museum. I thought it was great. It was excellent. It really set the tone, and it kind of sounds like the Twilight music a little bit. My wife pointed that out to me, and now I can't unhear it. But I actually really liked it. I thought it was excellent. Really set the scene. It was really good in the comedic moments. Had really good sound effects mixed with it too. It was a really good score and probably the highlight of the movie for me, honestly. All right, so tallying that all up, that brings my Letterboxd score to a 3.8 out of 5, which I'm rounding to a 4 out of 5. So would I recommend this movie? Yes, I would. I'd give it a 76% on Criticlist. I would consider this to be kind of a lesser version of a Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, Harold Lloyd type of film. They made kind of similar movies in this era. Like with Chaplin, he did The Kid or City Lights. Or with Harold Lloyd, he did The Freshman, Kid Brother, Buster Keaton, The Navigator, Steamboat Bill Jr. You know, those movies I think were much better set-wise and camera-wise and all that. They seem to have bigger budgets. This movie seemed a lot smaller, and you could tell it was on a stage. It was not real, which is kind of disappointing because those other ones, they're in real locations and real sets. This one, it feels like it's on a soundstage the whole time. Another thing, I do think it was weird that Mary Pickford was playing a 12-year-old, even though she was 32 or so. I thought that was a little strange. And it would have been so strange if all the actors were that age. I mean, still would have, but the fact that, again, she's like, I don't know, 5'5", all the kids are like 4'5". It was a crazy size difference. It's like she's obviously an adult and these are kids, you know. They didn't really try at all to hide that. I really think it should have been just all adults, not kids at all. I don't know, it was just really jarring. But other than that, I actually liked it. It's a cute and kind of romantic movie. But I don't know if I would put it up there with Keaton or Lloyd or Chaplin at all. I think they're definitely the better of the comedians in this era. But it doesn't mean this isn't a terrible movie. I recommend checking it out. All right, those are my thoughts on Little Annie Rooney from 1925. Thank you so much for watching and listening to today's episode. Make sure to follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Really Old Movies, where I discuss details about the week's particular film. New podcast episodes are released Saturdays at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music, and video versions on YouTube and Rumble, Mondays at 7 p.m. All right, thank you so much. This has been Really Old Movies. I'm your host, Harrison Scullin. Take care.